Hello, everybody. It's so lovely to see you all today. Thank you all so much for taking the time. It is a pleasure amongst pleasures to spend some time in your company today. If you haven't already, do pop in the chat feature, just like Mandy, Rachel, Sally, Maria, James, Lorna, Erica, Grace, Kat, Annette, Erica, Paula, Sally, Cecilia, Catherine, Emma have already, saying where you're representing from, just like Peter has right now. And also, if you haven't already, or in fact, a challenge for today, not a challenge, a nice share, is if you want to share today where you're going away on summer holidays, then please do, because it would be nice to see if folks are heading away over these next 6 weeks or so. While you're doing that, you'll be able to see in your chat feature that some of you will have the option which says two. And presently, if that says two, hosts and panelists, make sure to click that and switch it over to everyone, as you can see on the screen. And that will mean that everyone can see your messages, not just Vinay and I, throughout the duration of today's session. We've got Emma going to Vienna, which sounds like a beautiful rhyme. And we've got some other folks going to some wonderful places. I hope you have a lovely time in Disneyland Paris, Lauren. So today is a slight change in the schedule. We have one speaker today instead of two. That is because our representative from the legal sector unfortunately couldn't make today for some really, really good reasons. It's not my place to divulge those, but fair to say that we'd love to have Ryan back another day. He's a very lovely man, and that's all cool. But what that does give us is the benefit of a full session with Vinay, who is just a hero amongst men. We've just been going before we went live today, and I feel uplifted and relaxed all at the same time. So I know you're going to absolutely love him. Vinay has a storied career, taking him into organisations such as Egg as their head of change, National Express as their chief customer experience officer, as well as running his own company right now and being a TMM speaker, and just, as I say, an absolute hero, as someone who I know you're going to love. So today we have this opportunity to deep dive into keeping the customers we have happy, from the experience of customer experience, customer success. That's going to be one of my questions today, because even finding out those things will be quite useful. Before we get going, I just want to say a big thank you to our featured sponsor. So this week's featured sponsor is Cambridge Marketing College. They're very lovely people, and they've just released a new syllabus, or in the process of releasing a new syllabus with brand new CIM courses. So if you're interested in getting qualified with the CIM, Cambridge Marketing College are your folks. Likewise, a big thank you to our other sponsors, all of whom we'll speak about in more depth in future weeks. We've got Frontify Exclaimer, Sticky Beak, Planable, Cambridge Marketing College, Redgate, and ScoreApp as well, who are wonderful, wonderful folks. So now we head into the session, and we've got Stephanie as the last person in the chat saying hello. Please do keep that chat feature going. And if you've got any questions throughout the duration of today's session, do drop them into the Q&A, which is found in your toolbar below as well. We'll make sure to get those questions in throughout the duration of today's session. So with all that said, Vinay, hopefully your ego is suitably plumped, because it should be, because you are a wonderful human being. So let's get going on customer experience and customer success. So can you share, from your perspective, what customer success or customer experience is, and whether there's a difference between the two? Because we're coming into this, or I'm coming into this very much as a layperson, as a marketer, trying to understand your world just a little bit better.
Yeah, sure. And thank you for the wonderful introduction. So I'll add a third term into there, and then we can talk about the relationship of the three. So I'll add customer service into there as well, because I think that's another angle. So yeah, if you think about customer experience, is the collection of service points across your entire customer journey, whether that's through the interaction with your marketing, your branding, your sales and pre-sales process, whether it's through the operation, execution of your product delivery, etc., or after sales support. Each of those is a service point, and each of those interactions collectively together create the end-to-end customer experience. And what I say is the product of customer experience is memory, because it's the memories that we have of those brands that contain the emotion and the feeling of those. And it's that emotion that drives our behavior, and our behavior that then drives our results going forward, which I'm sure we'll get into. Customer success is, again, within that customer experience, I guess, hierarchy. And customer success is almost like an evolution of old school business development. And customer success was a coin termed around the approach that business development would have, where they closer align themselves to the goal of the organization that they're selling into. So having much more of a partnership approach, a collaborative approach to understanding what is that organization trying to achieve. And if I'm selling a platform in or a service in, the customer success is about how do I help the customer achieve their goals through the product and service that I have. I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely does. No, that's really, really useful. So for the purpose of today's session, it would actually be more relevant to speak about customer experience, because that's that totality
Sure.
hierarchy sort of thing.
Yeah.
Super useful. That's really, really good. Okay, so let's start getting into that then. So what would you say is the most common misconception around customer experience that you tend to encounter on the regular in your job?
Yeah, probably the most common misconception is customer experience happens in the contact center, and then that's it. Like it's to do with complaints, it's to do with after sales service, and as I said earlier, that's part of it, but it's not the be all and end all. It's that collection of all the way through. Because what you're trying to do really through customer experience is, through all of interaction, is create a consistency of feeling. You know, you're all skilled marketeers and brand experts. Your skill is in telling the story and setting the expectation of what customers are going to get by interacting with this product, service, or company. The skill in the customer experience is to ensure that the gap between that brand promise and the reality is like that. But in reality, often it's like that, right? And so customer experience is that kind of broader piece. So that's the first misconception. The second one is people jump to this thing about, oh, it's got to be about surprise and delight and all these magical moments and all these kind of things. And those are important things. But in order to get there, you need permission through delivering just consistently great basics. You know, how often do you deal with a company where they fail at some of the basic things, and then they try to do something that's, you know, kind of out here, gold plated or to the next level? So I think it's not about just these amazing, wonderful moments that you hear about, which are important, but it is about consistently delivering the basics really, really well every single time through excellence.
I love that. So Celia in the chat has said, I'm a bit quiet in my thing. So I've turned my gain up. So Celia, you're in charge of telling me whether my volume is correct now. So let me know. But thank you for that answer, Vinay, because that's super useful. And it strikes me that, like, so I've got two favorite brands at the moment. The first is Lock Hotels, and then the second is Fora, a co-working space. And with these two brands, exactly as you say, they're not, I mean, they are beautiful, you know, they do the extras really well, but actually it's the basics, the fundamentals that work really well. And it brings me back to a quote from Margaret Malloy in one of our first ever webinars, which was, a brand is a promise kept. And so when you're speaking about the first part of your answer there, where it was sort of like, we're just doing the thing that we were going to say we're going to do, that's really fabulous, and makes a lot of sense. The interesting thing, though, as you were speaking there, is that I think we came into today's session, or I certainly did, sort of anticipating a line somewhere between my work as a marketer and your work as a head of experience. But actually, it strikes me that there's an immense amount of crossover between the two. So how do you see that? Do you see yourself as a marketing person, or do you see yourself as a customer experience person? Or how do you see that?
All of the above. So there is a line, but it's not vertical, it's horizontal, and it's a line that joins things together. And if you think about the role of customer experience, or someone who's leading customer experience, often they don't control the parts of the operation that deliver the results. I'm not an operations director, I'm not those kind of things. It's like being a conductor of an orchestra, right? So I have the sheet of music and I know what it is that we're trying to play. And my job is to influence each of these skilled musicians and people that are brilliant at what they do to work in the right order, in the right context, at the right time to deliver that symphony. So the skill of a CX leader is really about relationship building, influencing, joining the dots horizontally, and being able to communicate from those different perspectives in the boardroom, being able to talk in marketing language to the marketing director and the brand director, being able to talk in the language of operations and commit the commercial team and the CFO. It doesn't mean I need to be an expert in all of those things. It's all about me understanding their world enough that I can create that connection that I can influence. And so it is a huge amount of crossover. You know, customer experience is horizontal in an organization where everything else is vertical. So you absolutely do flow across those things. Now, the downside of that is sometimes people in my career have gone, "What are you doing in my area? Get out, go and do your own thing." So it is about managing those relationships, and sometimes you can be seen as a threat or a "why are you in here and why are you asking these questions?" But it just comes back to helping people understand that actually this is about the bigger picture. This is about the end to end. My job in here is to help you look good in that bigger picture, if that makes sense.
I just got to point out that that's probably the smoothest answer that we've ever had. Like someone just go, "Oh yeah, it's not a vertical line, it's a horizontal line."
Yeah.
It's fabulous, and I can see the folks in the chat agree about the conductor analogy. Seems to work really well. Are there, when you're speaking about that horizontal line, I'm going really deep here. I'll go in a second. But are you speaking to literally every department? Is that your job, or are you doing bits, you know, with specifically marketing, with the contact center as an example, you know, but maybe you don't speak to finance quite as much, or how's that work?
I think it is every team, but it's your involvement with each team differs, and it's to different levels. Clearly, the more naturally customer-facing teams, you're probably likely to have more day-to-day conversation with and interaction with. But you know, for example, recruitment is just as important. You know, if your recruitment team isn't recruiting on brand to the right values, the right personality sets, the right people, and you're hiring the wrong people into your organization, that has just as much of a detrimental impact, because you know we're talking about the customer experience as the external experience that customers get, but it's driven by the internal culture. And if the insides aren't right, then the outside isn't going to be right. And the analogy I use for that would be, it's like, you know, when you go on a fitness regime, you can go to the gym all that you like, but if you don't eat well, if you don't take care of the insides, it's going to look lovely you're going to look great on the outside, but on the inside, it's just not going to be right, and that's not sustainable. So you have to do both. And so yeah, it differs from team to team. Clearly, you know, finance is one of those things, but also it's that paying attention to the internal customer experience between teams and departments. And we spend so much time measuring NPS between us and customers, or satisfaction between us and customers. But internally, do we ever measure the internal satisfaction from department to department, how teams work together, understand the friction points between those teams and fix those? Because when you take care of some of that, that again reflects in the outside experience.
That's super interesting. And like, it is funny. You know, this whole series is really about understanding other departments, you know, that internal dynamic between each of them, because, you know, that's how businesses work. It's a collection of people, you know, sort of working towards a goal. And
sure.
Business,
yeah.
So that's really helpful. I'm going to take us into a slightly different territory here, particularly as I'm going to loop in a question from one of the folks watching in today, who was asked in the Q&A. So I'm going to ask my question first, and then I'm going to come into the community's Q&A. So just to highlight to anyone watching in, do pop your questions into the Q&A, and we'll try and loop these in as we go. So my question is that with marketing, we kind of sit here with you know, diagnosis, strategy, and tactics, you know, is a way for us to understand the world of marketing. And not everyone uses that framework, but it's a framework nonetheless that has been really, really helpful for me to kind of rationalize my marketing world. Is there an equivalent in the CX world where you have a set of principles or foundations or strategies that it would be useful for people to understand how CX people kind of look at the world? I mean, you've already mentioned relationships being an important skill and stuff like NPS being an interesting metric. But are there the sort of frameworks and skeletons, so to speak, frameworks that you...
Yeah, yeah, there are probably six key components in a framework that I would adopt. And this is from my perspective in customer experience. There is a clear upfront piece, which is, I guess, the crossover with marketing and branding, which is what's the story here? What's the vision for how we want customers to feel? And some of that's influenced by brand values and the organization. So there's a clear crossover and joining of the dots in that specific space. And why that's important is that often when you talk to companies about their customer experience strategy and what they're trying to do, it seems to be independent of anything else. There's no clarity about what good looks like. There's a great slide that I use in some of the talks that I give with Alice in Wonderland, and this is brilliant bit where she comes across the Cheshire Cat for the first time, and she's at a crossroads, and she asks Cheshire Cat, "Which way do I go?" And he says to her, "Well, which way are you heading?" And she says, "Well, I don't know." And he says, "Well, it doesn't matter then, does it?" And so you need to have that clarity of vision about what you want that experience to be. People moan about Ryanair and make jokes about them, but Ryanair know exactly who they are. They know what they stand for. They know the experience that they want to deliver. We might not like it, we might not agree with it, but they know what they stand for. So there's that clarity of thought up front. And then you've got a set of kind of design principles or a framework that I would call it, that allow people to that give people the guiding star about how do we want to then, if that's how we want people to feel, how do we design our experiences? What are the principles? So they might be things like everything we're going to do is going to be super simple, low effort. We're going to make sure that everything's personalized as much as whatever your principles are in your organization to deliver that experience. The third then would be, how do we listen? And I don't know, you might be too young for this, Joe. You might not remember this. I'm a little bit older than you, but when I was a kid, there was a nursery rhyme about rainbows, red and yellow and purple, green, purple, orange and blue, whatever it is. And in there's a line that says, "Listen with your eyes, listen with your eyes." And as a kid, I was like, "What do you mean, listen with your eyes? How the hell do you listen with your eyes?" And what it actually meant to me growing up was, listening isn't just done with one of your senses; it's done with everything. But often in organizations, when they're listening for customers, it's through a survey, or it's through complaints data, or it's just one particular sense that we're using. But there's always more going on than that. So your breadth of listening, unstructured data, social media, reviews, customer feedback that we've asked for, customer feedback that we haven't asked for, imperial research, all of those things that we would do. It's how do we better understand our customers? So that's kind of the next piece of it. Then you've got your leadership and culture part about, well, okay, how do we create the culture that shows people what good looks like? And if you follow me on LinkedIn, I've shared stories about this recently, which is that importance of validation. I worked at McDonald's when I was a kid, when I was 16, 17 years old. And as part of that training, back when people used cash and not contactless, there was a little ultraviolet light that used to put notes under that would tell you whether they were real or not, right? And you learn about it in your training, and you just transactionally practice, put it in, take it out, put it in, take it out. I remember the first time my note lit up from a real customer. And I was like, "Oh God, what do I do now?" So I spoke to the customer and explained it was a fake note, and the manager came over and helped me. And then at the end of it, he just came over to me and he said, well done for spotting that. You've stopped somebody using a fake note." Now, it was a tiny little thing. It was only a £5 note. But the act of him telling me that it was valuable made me relate to that activity differently. So I suddenly placed a value on what was normally a transactional activity. And I thought, that's what good looks like. And furthermore, at National Express, for example, when I was rolling out a program of standards of how we wanted people to behave, one of the ways that we kind of rolled it out was we used an internal social media platform, which was Workplace, which is Facebook's internal version. And we rolled it out and we got people to share their stories of what they were doing. And the executive team would like them, comment on them. And then as they were doing that, it gave people validation to understand this is what good looks like. So that's kind of your next bit. And then you've got your governance and lead and your governance and quality control, I guess, which is the whole, how do you take that information and data that you're getting, prioritize to fix the right things in the right place, and how do you monitor the impact of those kind of things as well. And then the last one, we touched on it earlier, is measurement. What are the metrics? What are the things we're measuring? Now, the common metrics are obviously things like NPS and CSAT and things that people are familiar with. But equally, you've got to measure the things that are right for your organization too. And just a quick, another story I'll share. I was talking to somebody that worked for a B2B service. And this B2B service was a pest control company. And he was talking about NPS and saying, well, we don't really get a really good recommend score because nobody really wants us turning up outside their restaurant. Because if somebody sees one of our vans outside, no one's going to want to come in. So often we're in the shadows, we're at the back, we go in, we do our job and we get out. But we don't really get a will you recommend us, because nobody wants to admit that they've used our service. I said, well, what's more important to you then? What's the measure in your business that tells you that your team? And he went, actually, for us, it's about customers trusting that we do a good job, that they trust us to get the job done, do it discreetly, and do it the right way. And I was like, well, why aren't you measuring that then? Because if that's important to you and your brand, measure it. There's nothing in the rule book that says that you can't measure it. NPS and CSAT are really useful tools for all companies, but they might not be right for your organization. So picking those right metrics is important as well. And also things like tracking customer churn and long-term value and all of those kind of other things is important. So they're kind of the 6 fundamentals that I would have in kind of the framework.
Wonderful. That's so useful, mate. Thank you very much. Like, endlessly useful indeed. And actually, the question I was going to pick on, and the best speakers tend to do this, where you got a question lined up in your head and then they speak through the answer and then they answer it. So
yeah.
We've got Rachel here who asked, do you find NPS/Net Promoter Score to be useful, or do you typically get answers at just the far end of the scale? So how do you use it? So I think hopefully you've answered that there.
Well, I can lead into that a little bit more, Rachel, if you'd like. And again, this is my own personal view. You'll find people that will violently disagree with me. There are people that are in the NPS fan club, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's absolutely fine. My lived experience is that the purpose of NPS and why it was set up was to help companies to really understand the likelihood to recommend. It's supposed to be an indicator. But unfortunately, over the years, what's happened is that it's become, in some organizations, a target and an arbitrary number just to run after. And there's no kind of real sense and meaning behind why we're doing that. The most valuable bit in NPS is not the number, it's the data that you get as to what's driving the number. When you ask a customer, why have you given me that score? That's the value in it. So it depends on how it's used in an organization. It can be super, super useful, or it can be a real distraction.
That's fabulous. That's so useful, mate. Really, really fabulous. And actually, just to pick up, because we've got Rob McPherson, who is in himself a really fabulous marketing strategist, who we need to get speaking at TMM one day. Was speaking about the restaurant story and linking it to the Head and Shoulders current campaign about I didn't know you had dandruff and sort of the
I don't
and how
I saw a really great, I don't know whether Rob you might have seen this, but Rory Sutherland is one of my favorite. Like, I love listening to that guy, or I could listen to him forever. And I just saw a clip of him, funnily enough, where he was talking about in marketing how we use the bug to be the bit of, and the example he uses is Guinness. It's one of the slowest pouring drinks you'd have. Bar staff hate it, but it's all good things come to people who wait, that kind of thing. And it's using the thing that's wrong, the thing that's the defective part, as the thing that sells the product. So yeah, I get that, Rob. That's a really great one.
I love it. You've given us such a fabulous grounding into your world there, Vinay. So thank you. But it strikes me again, we sort of speak about horizontal lines and vertical lines and stuff like that, that there is such a big contribution that marketing can make to your part of the world. So what have the best marketers done when they're interacting with you to really, sort of build that relationship and make customer experience a real success from a marketing perspective as marketers?
Yeah, I think that fundamentally it comes back to what I talked about earlier on, and that's about having a collaborative mindset. There are some marketeers who have come across my career who are quite protective of their own. No, this is marketing, this is branding. You won't get involved in this. This is our thing. But actually, the power of, and I shared this when I spoke at your event, Joe. The power of marketing comes from the brand, and the power of the brand comes from the customer experience. I think the analogy is just as Superman gets his power from the sun, the brand gets the power from its customer experience, right? So really, marketeers should see customer experience as a powerhouse to helping 10x their marketing, to 10x their branding, because if they really lean in and collaborate together, it's a powerful duo. It's like, if you were to write a comic book and put the two best superheroes together, you'd probably put those two together. So definitely, I think the approach is to work in a much more collaborative way. We're both connected by wanting to understand customers from different perspectives. One is about understanding what customers could do, might do in the future, how we attract them, how do we get them in. The other's about, well, when we've got them in, how have we actually delivered to them? What did they tell us about? Did we meet the need? Did we meet the expectations? What's driving their behavior and their propensity to buy again? How do we then take that data and furnish our branding and marketing teams and work together to go, how do we make sense of all of this? But also, those emerging trends and what's happening for, future customers, not just from expectations, but language, the way that we interact, and how does that come through into the design of the overall CX?
Okay. It's so useful. And I may ask you to repeat some of the stuff that you just said here, but I want to make sure that Emma's question is covered off, because I think it's
Sure.
in a direct and tactical way when I tend to fluff about sometimes. So Emma says, do you have any tips for getting information from customer service brains over to marketers? So possibly even speaking about the relationship the other way, where go out to your folks.
Yeah, definitely. So I think in a lot of organizations, the customer service team and the contact center are often a forgotten entity. So they're almost left out to sea. They're normally the last ones to find out about change or something that happens, or it's the place that you go when stuff goes wrong. So I would say the way to get information out of them is to be interested. And so when I'm working with organizations, one of the first things I get people to do, well, two things I get people to do is, one, go and sit in the contact center, listen to calls, talk to the people, understand what's going on in there, spend time in there, because it's a treasure trove of information and data. And the really interesting thing is the customer service team don't always know the value of what they've got. So they won't naturally say to you, oh, we should tell marketing this, because they'll really want to know. But unless you're in that space listening and doing that kind of thing, it's really important. And nowadays, we've got tools that can transcribe calls and organize it into contextualization and sentiment analysis and all of these things that can help. But fundamentally, spend time either in the contact center, on the front line, and those kind of things. The second thing I get teams to do, particularly executive and heads of, is to go out and use the product or service exactly how a customer would. And I do that for two reasons. One, in an organization, the more successful you become and the more you're promoted, the further away you become from the customer. So the only time you have a connection with the customer is the data that you get in the KPI packs and the reporting. And the trouble with that is when it becomes data on a page and it's black and white text, there's no emotion in there. It's washed of any emotion. It's just numbers in a table, right? So you don't always get the full story. And the second thing is that often the people that work in organizations aren't users of the product regularly that they're selling. So the example I'll give you is at National Express, most of the people that work there wouldn't be natural coach customers or bus customers. So in order for them to really relate to it, we get them to use it. So I got the exec. We used to do a weekly thing, an annual thing once a week, exec on the move. And we'd send the exec out and we'd give them scenarios, go on the website, book your own ticket, try and get a refund, do all of the things that a customer would try to do so that they understood from the customer's perspective. Go into the website and try and find the answer to this question. You're not allowed to cheat. You're not allowed to use your PA. You're not allowed to use any inside connections you've got. You've got to do it as a customer. And it really brought home to a lot of people some of the things that were fundamentally wrong that they hadn't realized were having such an impact. So to answer Emma's question, the way to get it out of customer service, lean into customer service, be interested. They'll love you if you become their friend because they're just crying out for people to be in contact with them, ask some great questions, use the product and service. And when you use the product and service and you find things, share it with them. Say, look, I tried to go on our website and this is what happened. Are you getting many customers talking about this? Is this, oh yeah, we get this. And once you get them in a conversation, you won't be able to shut them up. So yeah, that's what my advice would be.
That kind of stuff is absolute gold, as you say. But if people don't realize, that that's a thing, that
Yeah.
that's to feedback, then yeah, it can be missed, and it'll be a shame because that's that's the stuff that really drives us forward. And just to highlight the points, we're midway through the series now on sort of speaking to non-marketing folks about the roles, and there's a very consistent theme that for the most part, and I appreciate this isn't universal, but people would love to have these chats, and find these things out. It's hard because we're so busy, everyone's so busy, but when you can, it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
It seems
And it's, you're right, and probably what's not helping at the moment is remote hybrid working. It's clearly got lots of benefits, but when you are not in regular contact, I remember picking up things, just accidentally bumping into somebody making a cup of coffee in the kitchen, and we get into a conversation about something they were working on. Oh, I don't know about that project, tell me a bit more. And I'd be able to kind of go, oh, I think one of my team needs to be involved in there, or somebody would say something to me about wanting to find out something, and we'd be able to do that. And those things don't tend to happen anymore by accident or by osmosis or whatever the term is. So I think we're in a real kind of difficult way to how to navigate that. So we have to try harder to create those. And you're right, bandwidth is an issue, but I think scheduling in half an hour, 45 minutes, just to talk to contact center team leaders, managers, listen to calls, or just say, listen, a lot of contact center software now allows you to listen in silently, remotely. So you can if you speak to your contact center team and say, listen, can I get a log on that I can just sit in the background and listen to calls for half an hour? They can set that up for you. It's not hard.
It's endlessly useful. It is actually one of the questions in the Q&A from Jenny, who asks any recommendations for tools. So maybe any specific tools that you tend to use that can analyze calls or something. But maybe if we broaden tools on your job.
There's a bunch of them. There's some real big hitting type tools like Qualtrics and Medallia, which are at the upper end. Then there's some great emerging technology, people like Word Nerds, who did a really great piece for me at National Express, and who I know pretty well. And then you've got people like Chattermill in that kind of space. You've got Centisum. So you've got these kind of brands that are really focused in on how do we take and unstructured data and help to kind of analyze stuff. So yeah, there's those. Most contact center telephony platforms, the more modern ones, the Genesis is your those 8x8 and others, and will allow you to do remote listening. It's not a difficult thing to do. A lot of them also now transcribe calls and will able to do some low level analysis on things coming out. So most organizations, if they've invested in tech in the last 5 to 10 years, will probably have some capability that will be able to do that.
I love it. Let's take us to a place where I think folks in slightly smaller organizations are probably likely to be doing, specifically solo marketers in smaller organizations are quite likely to be doing elements of customer service, specifically on social media. And so last week, 2 weeks ago, James and I visited Innocent Smoothies. And what was really was that they had a proactive social media person who was more in charge of posting and coming up with ideas and stuff like that. And then they had a community manager, they called it in that instance, who was the person in charge of responding to stuff. And I think a lot of marketers on the call today will probably be familiar with an experience where they've posted something to social, and then all of a sudden they're in charge of responding to possibly a negative response.
Yeah.
And I guess this is somewhere where our worlds could collide a little bit. I wondered, would you have any recommendations, like from a pro, on how to handle these sort of negative situations, and just how to sort of guide people through where the experience goes wrong, or the experience is playing out publicly, and it's going
Yeah.
wrong, because that's
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't have a huge amount of experience in working with really small organizations, but what I can say is this is where, when I talked about having that clarity about what do you want the customer experience to be like and having those kind of frameworks is really important, because the consistency of language, how you respond, needs to be the same, right? So somebody who's in a marketing function operating with the same language lexicon, brand guidelines to the same as somebody who's using in customer service as well. So I think that's the key thing, to have that, to get that consistency piece in there as well. What's also interesting is that with the emergence of technology, you've also got this world of AI coming in that's looking to auto respond. So making sure if you're using those kind of tools that you've got the right brand guidelines in, and it's using the right tone of voice and all those kind of things. So those are just a couple of thoughts. Like I said, I don't have a huge amount of experience in there, but I think if you take a step back, it's just really that whole communication skills piece. Again, it's human to human, whether it comes across in a complaint or not. Sometimes we can get startled because how do I handle this? But you're communicating with another human being. So it's just analyzing what's been said to you, dissecting it, and responding as humanly as you can. Now, I know there are certain industries where they don't like to say sorry because it's an admission of guilt. There are some brand knives like that. And I'm sure in those companies, you'll have some customer service training that will tell you where that organization sits. But I'm just a fan of, you might not be able to apologize for the thing that happened, but you can apologize for the way that somebody was made to feel. Or you can acknowledge straight up, it doesn't sound like we've got everything right here. Let me go and investigate what's going on. And sometimes that's just as much as needed. Okay, look, a quick rundown, right? So I'm doing this off the cuff. There are kind of four broad buckets of types of people. I say types of preferences that people have. We have all four, but most of us have one or two prominent styles of one. So there are some people that, for them, the most important thing is empathy, connection, and people. So the way you'd respond to them is to speak to that, and the clues would be in the language that they write in their response to you. So they talk about how they felt, the impact it had on them, the impact it had on their people. So you want to reply and try and connect in the same language. Then there are other people that are very logical thinkers, that are very structured. It's about detail. Again, you'll know them because when they write to you, their letter will be that long with lots of bullet points and lots of structure. So you need to take the time to respond in that structured way. Then you've got people that are very much more about the action. What they want is, it's speed is of the essence. I want you to show me that you're in control, and I want you to show me that you're taking action. And there are others that have a preference, which is much more about, okay, I want you to be positive. Yes, I want you to do all those things, but positive, give me my options, tell me about possibility and all those kind of things. And you can pick those out through the language that people use. And if you can respond to people in the way that they've written to you, you build greater rapport, and you've got a better chance of connecting with them. Sorry, I know we went off slightly off tangent, but it just seems an interesting thing to share.
That's the kind of thing that even just as a framework, for folks to be able to look in and go, okay, maybe through this lens, what outcome is desirable in this circumstance. I find that really useful and something that actually I could implement as well. So
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I can see in the questions, Celia has just referenced Insight Discovery. Yeah, that's a really great framework. So if any of you are using Insights or SDI or any of those kind of personality things, they tend to be based on the same Jungian psychology that can give you sort of similar outcome. But yeah, great frameworks.
Perfect. Thank you, mate. That's really useful. And as I say, it's that friction point, or that bumping together point, which particularly those in smaller teams may experience. It's really useful. Folks, I can see that there's 9 open questions. Some have been answered, some have not. And so I'm going to try to get closer to your questions at this point. But if you see any that you really like in the Q&A box right now, please give them a thumbs up, because that will mean that I know those are the ones you want me to prioritize. As Nicola says as well, these things do go wrong. Nicola said, I wonder what style of email CrowdStrike sent out last week.
Yeah,
a tricky situation.
Well, if they were using Microsoft, they might not be able to send any email out. So that'd be even double whammy, right?
That's a very fair point. A very fair point. let's. I'm going to stay in the smaller territory, even though I appreciate this isn't necessarily your wheelhouse, just because I think it's a really good question from Kat, and it may be that you can speak to some principles rather than specific advice, Vinay.
Sure.
Kat asks, it feels like smaller brands who are inherently oh no, wait, sorry, I've lost that question. Here we go. It's actually from Anonymous. We'll come back to Kat.
Okay.
We get the question from Anonymous. He's saying, trying to encourage people to consider the customer experience at every customer point across a business feels like a huge challenge, especially when teams work in silos. Any tips on where to start? And the caveat here is as a small two-person marketing team. But I think, if we take that question and sort of say any ideas on where to start if we're looking to optimize.
Yeah. Yeah. So when there's just a couple of you, completely, bandwidth and all that kind of comes into it, right? So I think there's two things that come to mind. One is breaking it down to smaller chunks and maybe focusing on a couple of areas that are the most impactful. That doesn't mean the others aren't, but there are points in the journey that are maybe that require the most attention. So focusing on them. The second thing that I'm going to say is this is where the power of storytelling really comes through, helping to join the dots through, because people don't always understand the interdependencies and unintended consequences of things that happen in isolation in a team. So somebody that makes a decision, so I'll give you a real live example. I was with a housing association and there was a problem with a complaint. And the individual dealing with the complaint was going backward and forward with the supplier, trying to renegotiate the cost of getting the roof done. But the time taken got to the customer to the point where they escalated it to the regulator, and the regulator ended up awarding them compensation, which was 4 times the value of what it would have cost to fix the roof in the first place. Now, that individual, in their own slice of their pie, were doing the right thing because they were driven by their KPIs to do that. But when you zoom out and give people the bigger story and the bigger picture, that's how people realize where their contribution makes sense. It's like we're all trying to put together a jigsaw, but somebody's taken the box and thrown the lid away, and we're all trying to put the pieces together. And we know that there are tactics about, well, if you start with the corner and the edges, you're probably more likely able to put it together. But you'll never get to the full picture if you don't have that zoom out ability. So part of the role is being able to help people to zoom out to say, look, these interactions all matter because when this happens, and this happens, this is the big impact. We get customers that return product, or they cancel their subscription, or it costs us money to fix this, or those kind of things, and really being able to link it back. So that's the narrative and the storytelling, getting out of just data and tables, but really telling that kind of playback and story is really important.
And that's so useful because it strikes me that as an answer, I don't think I appreciate before we came into today's session how much your experience of what you do actually links together the respective departments and can kind of speak to all of that. But what is interesting is that, as we've spoken to finance folks, as we've spoken to sales folks, as we'll speak to the CEO next week, kind of bringing together those things. Everyone has their own language to speak, but if you can speak those languages and you understand the impact and you're able to offer that zoom out capability, then one of the reasons for the series is to kind of, I don't want to say boost the power of marketing, but certainly as we speak about having a consistent brand experience, that's what marketers want to do. So
and I think this, it is about boosting the power of marketing, but boosting it in a way that more than marketeers can use the power of it. So I remember when I worked in a contact center, every so often the marketing team would say, "Can you ask this question on the call and collect this data?" But that's all we got. We never got the explanation as to why, what that data will do, how that fits the business objective. So then you just become transactional about it. So you go, "Oh, is it really going to matter if I ask them about whether they prefer email, text, or a phone call for their marketing preferences? Does it really matter? I'll just tick whichever one, or just won't ask the question, or whatever the thing might be." But when you explain to somebody to go, actually, the reason why we want you to ask this is because of this, and if we get this, it helps us achieve this objective, which aligns to the bigger prize, which is here. So everyone has a line of sight, and then they understand the importance of why you want that data, or why you want to capture something or whatever the thing might be. So it is really about that zooming out and helping people, because to your point, we're so busy, we're putting out fires, we're here with the stuff that we've got to work on. We don't get the chance to step back and zoom out. And that's what this is really about.
It's like maths, isn't it? You know, where people sort of say this is the answer, but they don't tell you why you're doing it. And
Yeah.
I remember in a different world when I worked in an agency doing a very similar thing. You know, quite regularly I would go to our designer, who eventually I decided didn't like me very much. But this, she actually didn't not like me. But the thing that I kept on doing with her was saying, we need a brochure, or we need
Yeah.
a leaflet or whatever. And to your point, you know, that idea of going, here's the problem we're having, you know, and can you help me craft the solution? This is, you know, not just customer experience. This is everything, right? This is working with people
Yeah.
and giving them
Yeah.
the why a thing is happening. Then it gives it purpose. It
Yeah.
gives empathy, and they can,
Yeah.
you know, which is endlessly useful and such an important skill. Like
Yeah.
we complain all the time as marketers about being the color in department, but if we're doing the same to other departments, it's, you know,
Yeah.
it's not good. And so
Yeah.
really useful. Thank you for that reminder, mate, because I think that goes a long way to helping folks interact with each other. Let's keep going with questions from the community, because fundamentally everyone watching in today are the most important people. So let's do that. So the next question again comes from anonymous. So it's either one person asking lots of really good questions, or several people who just don't want to announce.
That's okay.
Anonymous says, would you be happy to share any examples of some creative CX implementations that truly differentiate a brand? Which is, example questions are always really tricky, because like you feel like you're put on the spot with examples.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think of ones that I can share.
Well, should we go back
can
to
we
it?
come back to that one? Yeah, is that okay? I'll let that sit in my head for a bit and I'll come back to it.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so the next one comes from Kat, which is one that we started earlier. And so Kat asks, it feels like smaller brands are inherently better at CX, likely because they are closer to the customer. What do you think causes brands to lose that advantage as they grow, so that it appears that big brands don't care about their customers?
Oh, good question. I think it does become harder the bigger a business becomes. Like the more departments you have, the more disparate you are, the more sites you have. It's a kind of product, and then I think it's also about where it features in the conversation. In most board meetings, the agenda would go, let's talk about the finances, let's talk about sales, let's talk about marketing, let's talk about operations. We might talk about health and safety, legal, and then customer will be, well, should we just talk about the contact center quickly about what's going on? So the quality of the conversation in the organization really drives what that is. And so it's bandwidth, its importance, its size. I think one of the challenges that customer experience has as a discipline is that it's about farming for tomorrow, not for today. So the results that you're driving don't hit the immediate P&L. And often the challenge in big businesses is about what's the immediate impact on P&L, because it's shareholders that you're delivering for if you're a PLC. It's about hitting the end of year forecast, the quarterly numbers and all of those things, which are true in a smaller organization, but in a bigger one, it has, it's at scale. And so there's that immediacy thing about we just focus on the stuff that can make a difference now. So, let's spend more money on marketing to get more leads in that we know, that will turn to sales, and not spending enough time focusing on how do we keep the customers we have. And part of that is because, again, this whole call is going to be full of my little catchphrases. People don't change until the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of changing. And what I mean by that is, unless you feel the pain in your organization of poor experience, you're not motivated to fix it. And so if you've got things that our customers are being driven away, but at volume, you're still filling the top of the funnel in with one-time purchases, if it's not making a difference right now, it can wait. So people push it out and it doesn't become important, and therefore it doesn't feature in the conversation. Think in a smaller organization, you feel the pinch more immediately. if those sales aren't coming in, if the reviews start making an impact, because you haven't got the scale and the volume of transactions coming in. And so therefore it's much more, it's felt faster. That latency between when the pain happens and when you feel it is bigger in a big organization than it is in a smaller organization most of the time.
I love that. Super useful, and I think you're right. It's most of us probably don't have a pipeline that looks beyond the next sort of 6 to 12 months. I wouldn't have thought.
Yeah, exactly.
3 months.
Exactly. And sorry, Kat's just put a comment on there about reminding people that no complaints doesn't mean happy customers. She's absolutely right. One of the silent killers in your business is not the complaints. So if you think about where you hear from, hearing from people that love your products and services is great because you get really good value data. Hearing from people that have been bothered to complain because you've done something wrong is really interesting and helpful. But lots of businesses have a group of customers in the middle that experience a 7 out of 10 or a 6 out of 10, which is not bad enough for them to complain, but it's not good enough for them to recommend either. So all they do is they up and leave and go to your competitors. They won't feature in your complaints data. They won't feature in your NPS data. But yet they've tried your product once, twice, or whatever. They just become silent leavers, exactly as Kat said. So, that's I think a bit of a blind spot in organizations that they don't pay enough attention to that.
That's really fascinating. And so Louise has put in the chat here, how do you track those 7 out of 10s? But I would also add to that, where do you place your energy when it comes to retention? I mean, maybe it's different for every business, but do you have a philosophy? Do you double down on the 9s and the 10s out of 10s, or do you spend more times on the 8s?
There's no simple answer to it, unfortunately, Joe. I wish I could give you our focus here. I think if you base it on the following 2 or 3 things, when you ask most people what's been their best customer experience, most stories start with, I was dealing with this company, this went wrong, they fixed it, and this is what they did for me. And that this is what they did for me is normally how it made them feel, how they were treated in that process. So there is definitely currency and value in the customer recovery piece when you do something wrong. I suppose the challenge is the gap between when that goes wrong and how long you leave it to recover. So I'll share another story, if I may. A friend of mine shopped at a well-known high street supermarket, one of the big brands. She shopped and she would spend about £200 to £250 a week on shopping. And it would always be delivered. And she had a fast pass thing that allowed her to book slots, right? So the 3 data points there already. Her delivery, so she's been using them for 5 years, same sort of pattern. And what happened was that recently one of her deliveries didn't go to plan. The long story short, she back and forth with the contact center, didn't go plan. So she decided to take her business elsewhere. She went to a competitor. She cancelled her fast pass. She stopped spending, and she moved to a competitor. Now the supermarket that she left had the data points of the spend suddenly stopping, and she was a customer of their loyalty program, so they would have seen the associated data. They've got the data point that says she's also cancelled her direct debit or thing for her fast pass. They've got the data point that says this customer called our contact center at some point. But all of those sit in different data points in different teams. So no one's triangulated them together to make a recovery call. It's too late now. She's moved on. She moved to another provider. But had that call come within 24 hours, somebody went, oh my God, this customer has cancelled this. This has happened. That might have been a recovery. Sorry. So that's kind of part of the challenge. So definitely the recovery. I think focusing on that, focusing on those moments and designing your service that those 7 out of 10s and 8 out of 10s are easily turned into 9s and 10s. And the easily turned into doesn't take a lot, Joe. It's more about how people are treated. You remember, customer experience it's memory, right? It's emotion. And so those simple things. So when I've been to restaurants where the food's been fantastic, the venue's been great, but you're left a little bit short because actually the service wasn't quite up to scratch. Little things that they missed, little things that they could have done that, again, wouldn't have cost them a lot of money or no money whatsoever. And it's those things that I think it's about when you empower your teams on the front line and those executing service, it's giving them the empowerment to do those things that will do that. So there isn't really an easy way of tracking the 7 out of 10s. It shows up a bit in your NPS data and stuff, but I think using the other feedback tools that we talked about earlier about unstructured data analysis, looking at social media, looking at online reviews, start to give you some intelligence that you can see the kind of things that they're saying.
I love that. Thank you. That's so useful. It strikes me as it's being processed through my marketing brain. And sometimes I feel a bit guilty about sort of processing things in this way, but like, these are your opportunities for user generated content as well, right? So something goes really right. So for example, we use the example of the Stanley Cups, where ice cubes remained cold in someone's Stanley Cup, even though their car caught fire, and the Stanley Cup remained. And so they decided to replace their customer's car. I think it was like a $20,000 expense or whatever, and that went around the world as a viral moment. And then all, like Stanley has gone like crazy. You got another example like the North Face, who I think someone complained that their jacket wasn't waterproof enough, and North Face kind of went a bit crazy with it. They helicoptered out a new waterproof jacket to this person. I don't think it has to be that far. It can be the little gestures, exactly to your point. But if you can take them back to sort of from one to the other, it's the glory.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we dial it back down to a one person business, if some of the guys and girls on here are one man marketing team, self employed, like right now, you're all having a customer experience of me, like that's what's happening. This interaction is telling you about me, my values, what I stand for. It's not necessarily about what I know, but you're getting a feeling from me of the kind of person I am. And if I could see you, then I would get the same about you, not you, Joe, but everybody else, right? So, so some of it is as simple as in that interaction, showing up the best you can and being that person. And sometimes, like I would do with certain clients or conversations I have, they'll mention a book or something, and I'll go, do you know what? I'll just send them that article, or I'll buy that book and I'll send it to them. But I don't do it for every client, and it's not because I don't value those clients. It's just when it feels like the right thing to do. But it's when you give your people that freedom to be able to do that and make that choice and go, actually, the right thing to do was this. So yeah, those things are brilliant. They're legendary. You hear these great stories on social media about when people do heroic things, and they all do add value to the brand. But the consistency and doing it day in, day out, and just giving people that real basics about, do what you say you're going to do it in the way you say you're going to do it. That is the bedrock of all great customer experience.
Mate, that would be such a fabulous way to end it. And we are like towards the end of the session. I'd need to loop back to that question that we came to about 10 minutes ago.
Yes, yeah.
You had an idea that struck you. Otherwise, it's all good, because that was a beautiful last sentence as well.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think about some of these some things. I mean, again, just building on what we've just said, they're not necessarily deliberate things that we've designed in to say that you must do this when this happens, but it's more to do when we've given people the framework. So I haven't worked with this organization directly, but I know people, like if you go to Pret, there are people who are empowered to be able to give you a free coffee or a free donut or do something for you in that moment if they wish to do so. I know that when I was working in home finance in a bank, we gave people cards that they could send to customers just to say, welcome to your new home, if they felt like they wanted to do that from that perspective. It was more about putting in that culture and framework that allowed people to use their own judgment and kind of with the confidence that this is the right thing to do for the organization. That's more the kind of thing that really delivers those killer moments. So in all those examples of North Face and Stanley Cup and all of those, the person would have made that decision because they would have been confident that their brand would have been okay with that. Like, I'm not sure that if I was at National Express and somebody went, I tell you what, we'll just ship them out a brand new coach for £250,000. I don't think that would have gone down very well. But equally, if somebody said, listen, this customer's had an awful journey, I'm going to send them some flowers and say I'm really sorry and do that, then that's great, but that was the freedom that we gave people within that framework.
I really love that. And it goes so far. I know that James, my co-founder, will be screaming at the screen right now about his experiences working for house movers and you know, very, very similar. You know, if they broke something, they replaced it, you know, and
Yeah.
it's basics, but it's true.
Yeah.
Anyway, mate, we've had our hour and you've been outstanding. So thank you very much. We
Oh,
had
you're welcome. Thank you.
a 10 out of 10 MPS rating from Rachel earlier. We've got
Thanks, Rachel.
absolutely loved the session and so much more. We've got Kat saying I love today as well. So thank you, mate. And folks, I appreciate we're getting towards summer holidays now, or we're in summer holidays today. So it is wind down time, but we have one last session before we head off on our summer breaks, and that's next week with what marketers need to know about CEOs and how they think about marketing. Be the final session in this series about us looking at other departments. So if you can make it, it'll be an absolute joy to have you. While you all say just lovely, lovely things in the chat to you there, Vinay. So you've done very well. With all that said, thank you all very, very much for taking the time today. You're all absolute legends. Also, a big thank you to Cambridge Marketing College for being the featured sponsor this week, as well as the rest of our sponsors, all of whom we'll spend a lot of time speaking about in future weeks. With all that said, hopefully see you next week for the last session before our summer break. Vinay, thank you very much. And thank you to everyone for making today.
You're welcome. I've just popped my LinkedIn. If anybody wants to connect and follow up on anything, then feel free to reach out.
We'll do that in the follow-up email as well. So we'll get that all sorted. All that said, I hope everyone and take care. See you soon.